Beth Bartlett is our first presenter, and the presentation is For the Love of This Life, Carol Crisp's contribution to ecofeminist thought. And I'll read your bio, Beth. Beth Bartlett, PhD, is an educator, author, activist, and spiritual companion. She's Professor Emerita of Women, Gender, and Sexuality Studies at the University of Minnesota, Duluth. She also served as co-facilitator of the Spirituality Task Force of the National Women's Studies Association. She's the author of numerous books and articles, including Journey of the Heart, Spiritual Insights on the Road to a Transplant, Rebellious Feminism, Camus' Ethic of Rebellion and Feminist Thought, and Making Waves, Grassroots Feminism in Duluth and Superior. He has been active in feminist, peace and justice, and rights of nature and climate justice movements, and has been a committed advocate for the water protectors. Welcome, and thank you for your patience.
Thank you, Annette, and hopefully I'll stay with you all. Every fall, students in my Women in Spirituality class and I would hike up into the hills overlooking Lake Superior to dive deep into our spiritual connections with the natural world. In the winter, my ecofeminism class would hike into the snowy pine forest to do the same. Always we would come to the point in our time together when I would invoke these words. There are no hierarchies among beings on earth. We are different from the swallows who fly in spring, from the many-faceted stones on the beach, from the redwood tree in the forest. We may have more capacity to shape our lives than other beings, but you and I will never fly with the grace of a swallow, live as long as a redwood tree, nor endure the endless tossing of the sea like a stone. Each being has its own intrinsic beauty and value. How can one listen to these words and not be changed? Taking the meaning of these words into one's body, paradigm shift happens. Herein lies the gift of Carol Crisp to ecofeminism. In her rethinking of theology and nature, Crisp contributed a vital spiritual dimension to ecofeminist thought, deepening it by unearthing the root issue of the Western paradigm, that mind-body value dualism is grounded in a theology that separates the divine from the earth and everything associated with it. Ecofeminism posits the oppression and domination of women, nature, and colonized others are inextricably linked because of two paradigmatic habits of mind endemic to Western culture: mind-body value dualism and the logic of domination. The first posits an artificial separation of non-dichotomous concepts into oppositional pairs and valuing the one over the other, such as man, woman, mind, body, spirit, earth. From this arises the second, what Karen Warren has named the logic of domination, which argues that the superiority of everything associated with the mind, men, humans, white-bodied peoples, justifies their domination of everything associated with the body, women, nature, colonized others. This paradigm is inculcated into all of those living within Western cultures, which is practically everywhere on earth due to this very logic. Ecofeminist thought examines the roots of this paradigm in Cartesian dualism, Enlightenment valuing of rational thought, in a scientific worldview that regards the natural world as an object to be analyzed, exploited, and controlled, in Aristotelian justifications of slavery and the subordination of women. But Crisp named the deepest and most stubborn root, the separation of divinity from nature. She acknowledged the many others who made similar connections, Susan Griffin, Polygon Allen, Alice Walker, and others. But her work underscored the spiritual and religious roots of the Western paradigm. She showed how Platonic dualism, the denial of finitude and death, and the vision of the good as transcendent of the earth have shaped this paradigm. She showed how Greek thought became the basis of a transcendent Christian God and a theology in which the earth and the body are regarded as impediments to the spiritual, with the resultant spiritual goal being to transcend the flesh and its desires and to seek fulfillment not in this life, but in the next. All things associated with the body and the earth, women, people of color, sexuality, emotions, nature, immanence, came to be seen as barriers to the more valued spirit, reason, culture, white, Western, male, transcendent God. This theology justified the conquest and domination of women, colonized others, and the earth. Ecofeminist attempts to counter dualism, while important, are not sufficient. Paradigm shift must begin with the uprooting of this spiritual core. One might argue that such a shift could be accomplished by simply eliminating that core and establishing ecofeminism on a secular basis. However, this underestimates the power of theological beliefs to continue to influence what Susan Griffin called our habits of mind. As Christ argued, religion and its symbology live deep within our psyches. Even those who do not actively participate in a religion may be affected by religious influences in unconscious ways. It is not enough simply to reject a simple system. It must be replaced, or the mind will fall back into familiar patterns. Similarly, the ecofeminist paradigm must be grounded in a new spiritual foundation, which for Christ is the quote, the divine goddess, God, earth, the whole of which we are a part. Not a transcendent and dominating God, but rather an immanental divine, dwelling within all beings. The divinity of all beings upends mind-body dualism. As Christ so boldly stated, there are no hierarchies among beings on earth. Such a simple statement, and yet so revolutionary. Just as a transcendent theology places humans as the pinnacle of creation, so too does Western philosophy dwell on establishing the uniqueness and superiority of humans to all other beings. The capacity for reason, language, even humor have been given as bases for human preeminence. Yet Christ deftly disrupted this entrenched belief system by illustrating the many ways that each being has its own unique abilities, whether that be to live well beyond the human lifespan, soar through the air, or endure the tossing of the sea. She moves us to grasp in our depths that every being has value not for what it can provide as a resource for human existence, but simply and profoundly in and of itself. This, she said, is a supreme relativizing, to know that humans are no more valuable to the life of the universe, and no less, that the life force cares no more for, quote, human creativity and choice than it cares about the ability of Bermuda grass to spread or moss to form on the side of a tree, end quote. It is stunning in its dissolution of hierarchy, in its profound egalitarianism, in its deepest respect of all beings. This spiritual core is fundamental to ecofeminist paradigm shift. It also implies an ethic that has been a motivating and guiding ethic of ecofeminism. It is an ethic based on respect and reverence for all of life, that recognizes our interdependence in the web of life, and that our actions on this earth are limited by the value inherent in all beings. It is an ethic that enlists our love and deep sense of connection to act to enhance the life possibilities of all beings. For once one knows that love, one cannot simply stand by, one must act. Living according to this ethic cannot come soon enough. Christ's words, quote, the knowledge we could destroy this earth weighs heavily on me, end quote, seem more pressing than ever. She cautioned against a theology that leads us to believe that everything on earth is for our use, even to the point of extinction and destruction. She warned of the political and ecological consequences of valuing transcendence over immanence, of giving priority to an everlasting life in some transcendent realm over life on earth. In denial of the finitude of life, eschatological theology that espouses ultimate value to a life beyond this one justifies, perhaps even encourages, the destruction of the planet. She pointed to the rise of apocalypticism as raising the frightening possibility that those who contemplate total destruction of life on earth imagine that it is the will of God. Attention to this destructive theology now seems even more urgent. As life as we know it becomes more and more apocalyptic, fires, floods, drought, the pandemic, racial conflict, wars, and insurgencies around the globe, I hear more and more an almost gleeful pronouncement that these are signs foretelling the coming of the rapture, that this at last is the end of life on this earth, when believers will ascend to the heavens, and that it is God's will. In this moment, this theology and the political choices it inspires is perhaps the most dangerous belief on earth. In its stead, Christ expounded and urged a theology that recognizes our finitude as part of the cycle of life and death, and calls on us to live and love and act for love of this life. As she said, our task is here, not in some life beyond this one, here. Her deep recognition of the preciousness of life pierces me. The possibility that we will destroy this earth and soon feels very present. I can feel the impending harm in my body. I have lived on this precipice between life and death in very personal bodily ways. Having survived several episodes of sudden cardiac death, I feel the exquisite gift of this life, this earth, with every nerve in my body. To echo Camus' words, I love this life with abandon. Christ's eloquent argument that we must act to stop the impending destruction, simply for love of this life, moves me to my very core. Quote, "What can stop us," she wrote, "is a deeply felt connection to all beings in the web of life. What can stop us is that we love this life, this earth, the joy we know in ourselves and other beings enough to find the thought of the end of the earth intolerable," end quote. Not far from my home, hundreds of mostly indigenous women have been camped along the construction route of the Enbridge pipeline that will bring tar sands oil through indigenous territories and pristine waters. They have gathered to pray and to resist and have suffered brutality at the hands of arresting police, and they persist. Acting out their love and connection with the land and water, they have dedicated their lives to their protection, and by their example show us what it means truly to live by that ethic. Chris' contribution to ecofeminism is inestimable, providing a profoundly egalitarian, respectful, loving theology upon which to ground an ecofeminist paradigm, an ethic to motivate and guide our actions in the world. I have little time left to mention the many and profound ways Chris' work has impacted me personally. So suffices to say that her work has been fundamental to my teaching and my understanding of embodied spirituality in an ever-changing divine. She showed me how a world so wounded by patriarchy hungers for and will ultimately find healing in the restoration of the feminine divine. I will forever be grateful to Carol Christ. She gave words to some of the most profound truths of my life, deepened my understanding of the immanence of the divine and the intrinsic value of all beings, validated my deep love of this earth, and inspired my activism for love of this life.
Oh.
Thank you, Carol.
Okay, I think I'm there now.
Thank you very much, Beth. That discussion of Carl Christ's contribution to ecofeminist thought. And you definitely stayed within time. A little time left. So now we seem to be stable. Everything is stabilized, which I'm very grateful for. I didn't get a chance to give a proper welcome and just wanted to introduce the panelists for this panel A, Ecofeminist Philosophy, Art, and Activism. We just heard from Beth Bartlett. Marian Hertnagel will be our next contributor. Then Gina Messina and Pamela Eakins will also speak. So Marian Hertnagel-Nash will speak on theology and ecology, finding new ways of thinking and being, an invitation. An independent scholar, Marianne Hertnagel earned an MA in Philosophy and Religion from CIIS and a BA in Liberal Arts Humanities from John F. Kennedy University. She was born and raised in Germany before coming to the United States in 1994. She is an educator with specialization in Waldorf kindergarten education, who is also passionate about how theology, religion, spirituality, and philosophy relate to the current climate crisis and state of life on Earth. She loves to explore how these fields interrelate and how theology, and philosophy can point to possible answers and new ways of thinking about how to live life more sustainably.
For introducing me. I hope everyone can hear me. I will speak with a slight accent. Thank you for inviting me to the panel and accepting my proposal. For the purpose of this paper, I will not go into much details in regards to the current issues. Instead, I will try to point out some of the interconnectedness of one's view and beliefs and how they interrelate with one another, like ecology, theology, and theology, the need for new views of thought, language, and possible implications for one's personal life. Eco-theology, theology and ecology, finding new ways of thinking and being, an invitation. The relevance of theology to contemporary postmodern philosophical, scientific, and feminist thinking, and thinking in general, call for the need for an inclusive and new formulation of ethics, the need for the study of the goddess, the history of the women's spirituality movement, and the embeddedness of theology within human experience. I call for the importance of theology as a new field of study related to emerging paradigms of thought and scientific inquiry. Theology is not just another academic subfield of feminist thinking or Christian theology, nor is it just another religion within the Western context of the study of religion. It is relevant in the efforts to develop new language for evolving paradigms, specifically the need to articulate new ideas in eco-psychology, physiology, and ecological sustainability, eco-philosophy, spiritual ecology, human ethics, and a change in approaches in transformational work on healing modalities like trauma work and healing in general. Theology attracts me because it's inclusive of other ways of knowing and diverse perceptions of reality. With this presentation, I will try to contribute to the development of the field of theology with the goal of establishing and advancing theology as an emerging interdisciplinary field of study, which employs methodologies that support multiple ways of knowing and being. In enlarging and further delineating the discussion of theology, I hope to encourage a cross-cultural and life-sustaining worldview. I see theology, when fully understood, as an emerging center and network of social transformation. Theology and theology, when inclusive of other belief systems, like with the help of an inclusive duality, like for example, what we can find in the Tao, in the Yin and Yang, present a possible framework for creating an articulation of women's and men's spirituality, wherein their embodied knowledge of reality can be validated. This grounding can lead to a new embodied ontology, which would allow women and men to relate more skillfully to each other and the rest of the natural world. As well, creating new ways of thinking and paradigm shifts in ecology and sustainable ways of life and being. If theology was more fully developed, it could fulfill its potential to first become a field of academic study, second, establish more clearly the history of the goddess in contemporary thought on religion and to suggest its relationship to current ideas and worldviews, third, provide a frame of reference for women's and men's authentic religious experiences and their relationship to male and female embodiment, and fourth, further the recognition of a new frame of reference regarding women and men, one that values their respective contributions to society. An interdisciplinary approach of theology can help to create a framework for the study of this broad subject, wherein an ontological framework of women's and men's spirituality in general, and feminine religious experiences in particular, can be acknowledged in order to create greater balanced harmony within individual societies and our entire environment. Theology is situated in contemporary struggle for the Gaian survival of all. The potential of theology in the 21st century is relevant to efforts to develop new language for evolving paradigms, specifically the need to articulate new ideas in eco-theology, ecologos, eco-psychology, physiology, and ecological sustainability. Carol Chris' works and writings are most important and give an excellent foundation in this groundbreaking thinking in a much needed renewal of human thinking and interactions with all beings in life. In Rebirth of the Goddess, fi- sorry. In Rebirth of the Goddess, we can find meaning in we can, and also in Goddess and God. Carol Christ situates theology within Western thinking, beginning with the Greeks, and shows the need of a rebirth of the goddess spirituality within Western postmodern context. Her view of the story of the goddess is unique, and it calls for an ontological framework of theology that expands the current view, the understanding of Greek Western philosophical thoughts and reference. Her work, when situated within this call for ecosocial, provides a much needed frame of reference and enables me to explain some of the concepts of theology in more detail. Melissa Raphael, in her book Introducing Theology, Discourse on the Goddess, gives a comprehensive overview of what theology is all about, a summary of theology itself, and an excellent introduction to theology within the context of Western thinking, pointing out the importance, influence, and works of Carol Christ. Her book is a first attempt to summarize the various aspects and areas of theology. Yet it does not conclude by showing some of the emerging concepts of theology. It shows some of the current concepts of what theology is and can be within the limitations of Western understanding of a religious view of theology and the need to expand to be more inclusive of many ways of knowing and being. In her other book, Melissa Raphael, Theology and Embodiment, situates theology as an emerging field of study to other academic disciplines. At the same time, it uses concept of postmodern science to explain what theology is and its potential as a widening academic field of studies. Theology is in part explained within the context of quantum physics and science. It's not just one reality of religious expression and thought, but of many that are inclusive of each and in parts interdependent. From my understanding, theology is not a written religion with any dogmatism or creed, nor is it a religion within I can find a male-centered deity. Yet it is inclusive of these. It is a study of the goddess, ritual and religious practices. It honors views of the earth and nature that are inclusive of the male and the female. And it mainly originated in female forms of religious practices. It is an interdisciplinary field of study that employs methodologies that support multiple ways of knowing and practices, while at the same time honoring epistemological diversity, expanding the developing discussion within theology to broaden the emergence of a cross-cultural and life-sustaining worldview. It can also support expanding views that are more inclusive in ecology, philosophy, and other areas of studies and ways of life in general, situating itself in an emerging center and network of social transformation. It has inherent values for a possible framework for creating an articulation of women's and men's spirituality. And it can also create to a new embodied ontology, which would allow men and women to relate to each other and the rest of the natural world as well. In general, feminine religious experiences can be acknowledged in order to create a greater balanced harmony within individuals, societies, ecology, and the environment, ongoing ecological crisis and global warming. An eco-ontological theology is inclusive of her story of the goddess, its relevance in contemporary postmodern philosophical, scientific, and feminist thought, while fostering the for a new embodied ontology of spiritual experiences, emotions, and more. It shows the need for an inclusive and new formation of ethics, as pointed out in the Rebirth of the Goddess. And the embeddedness of theology with embodied human experience. it is very important to develop a new language in evolving paradigms and thoughts in general. Again, theology, in particular eco-theology, are much needed to articulate new ideas in ecopsychology, ecological sustainability, and other areas of studies. Maria Gimbutas wrote in her book about old Europe that all the way into the 21st century, the living goddesses that she uses. I'm a little bit confused. In her archaeological research, Maria Gimbutas brought in linguistic, mythology, anthropology, and aesthetics. She analyzed myriad figurines and as well as related symbols and signs found in her own and many other archaeological excavations, including the excavations of tomb temples, sacred places, and ritual centers. Quote, religion focused on the wheel of life and its cyclical returning. The goddess manifested her countless forms during various cyclical phases to ensure that they functioned smoothly. She revealed herself in multiple ways through the myriad facets of life, and she is depicted in a very complex symbolism. Gimbutas, 2001. My invitation in this presentation is to point out the need for a new female ontology within Western philosophy that incorporates widespread history and patterns of goddess spirituality and helps to promote an earth-honoring emerging ontological philosophy. I use the meaning of the term ontology as defined in the Routledge Encyclopedia of Philosophy. In conclusion of this presentation, I have to skip through a few things, my time is running out. In conclusion of this presentation, my hope is that my contribution to the ongoing discussion of theology will help to establish theology as an emerging interdisciplinary field of study, employing methodologies that support and are inclusive of multiple ways of knowing and being. I also hope to encourage a cross-cultural and life-sustaining worldview in which theology is the emerging center with implications for a global economy, for business, and for education. Theology as of today is not established as its own field of academic studies and inquiry. Instead, it is listed under feminist or Christian theology, which does not do justice to the subject. I would like to finish this presentation with a quote from Rebirth of the Goddess by Carol Christ that somehow summarizes my invitation. But if the lie of patriarchy is so obvious, why is it believed? Why doesn't the audience laugh and go home when Apollo and Athena speak nonsense? Why have whole cultures believed that powerful women are monsters and dragons who must be slain because they are the source of sin and evil in the world? Thank you so much.
Thank you, Marianne, for your
And I
presentation.
apologize for my
That's okay.
in between. It's my first presentation ever.
Oh, well, congratulations on making it through your first presentation.
So,
I feel
thank you.
honored. Thank you. You can take a deep breath. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next presentation will be by Gina Messina. Gina Messina will present on She Who Lives, the Ecofeminist Activism, Sisterhood, and Infinite Wisdom of Carol P. Christ. Gina Messina, PhD, is an American feminist scholar, Catholic theologian, activist, and single mom. She serves as Associate Professor and Department Chair of Religious Studies and Executive Director of the Institute for Women at Ursuline College. She is co-founder of feminismandreligion.com, has written for the Huffington Post, and is author or editor of 5 books, including Faithfully Feminist. Messina has presented across the US at universities, organizations, conferences, and on national platforms, including appearances on MSNBC, PBS, NPR, and the TEDx stage. She has also spoken at the Commission on the Status of Women at the United Nations to discuss matters impacting the lives of women across the globe. Messina is active in movements to end violence against women and explores opportunities for spiritual healing. Welcome, Gina Messina.
Annette, thank you so much. So I first want to say, Annette, it's nice to see you personally. So this is wonderful. And it's such a privilege to have the opportunity to present on a panel with Marianne and Beth and Pamela. And Marianne, my very first paper I ever presented at a conference was actually on Carol's work. So we share that. And it's humbling to be here to talk about Carol, someone who I cared for very deeply. So given the topic of our panel, I actually had created an art piece. I'm going to do a screen share, and I thought it might be nicer to look at than my face while I am reading. So one of the things that I engage in is called sound wave art. And my hope was to make this animated and moving. But that didn't quite work out. Can you see this okay? What I did, I captured a sound wave of Carol's voice, and my goal was to make it into a spiral. It didn't quite work out that way, but this is actually Carol's voice, a recording of her talking about why women need the goddess. So I thought it would be a nice way to invoke spirit during this time. So thank you for letting me say all of that. Carol P. Christ was a trailblazer. As the foremother of the goddess movement, activist, proud candidate for the National Green Party of Greece, and eco-feminist spiritual leader, she changed the way we understand and recognize women's engagement within our religious, spiritual, and eco-social worlds. Through her writings, teaching, colleagueship, and mentoring, Christ called us and continues to call us to recognize our abilities to shift the narrative and become active participants and change agents within our local and global communities while honoring the web of life. For many of us, Christ was a friend, a teacher, and a confidant, roles she took very seriously. She referred to herself as a foremother, however, not because of her groundbreaking research and founding of the goddess movement, but rather because the role of motherhood was important to her. The myth of Demeter and Persephone is one she often pondered and explained that she recognized Demeter as, quote, a model of her responsibility to her spiritual daughters, end quote. As women identified students and scholars, we find ourselves consumed by structures and systems that we must that tell us we must sacrifice the sacredness of who we are to be accepted within the masculine defined world of academia. However, Chris laid a new path, teaching us that our truths are worthy, that our stories must be spoken, and that is through sharing our experiences that we realize we are not alone. Her boldness to leave the traditionally defined academic institution to pursue a life of meaning and purpose, a life that honored her values and her value, is a story we must embrace and learn from. With her extraordinary decision to move to her beloved home in Greece, where she began the goddess pilgrimage, Chris demonstrated the creative ways we can engage in scholarship outside of the traditional classroom, embody our work while building a bridge that encourages dialogue beyond the ivory tower. Grounding her efforts in an eco-feminist ethic, she welcomed all voices, remapped the terrain, and offered an opportunity to experience a spirituality that pulled us from concrete structures and gently laid us within the life-giving body of all that is sacred. Christ's commitment to the spirit of sisterhood and dismantling hierarchies was as critical as her role of mentor and mother. However, she reminded us that the alternative to structures of control by the dominant is not no structure, but rather carefully thought out structures that ensure that every voice is heard, the voices of all women, of all those marginalized, colonized, and betrayed by the distorted patriarchal norms. For Christ, sisterhood extended beyond our relationships with humans to include all beings who have been robbed of voice. Her founding of the goddess pilgrimage honored this sisterhood. Susan Griffin's book, Woman and Nature, was one of Chris's favorite books, and she adopted the following passage as the pilgrimage morning ritual blessing. Quote, "This earth is my sister. I love her daily grace, her silent daring, and how loved I am, how we admire the strength in each other. All that we have suffered, all that we have lost, all that we know, we are stunned by this beauty, and I do not forget what she is to me, what I am to her." In Rebirth of the Goddess, Chris named 9 touchstones based upon observations of the world that are, quote, "rooted in the insight that human and other beings are connected in the web of life," end quote. These touchstones are interwoven and offer an ecofeminist ethic grounded in the sanctity of all life. Chris explained that the highest value of all other values should be judged by whether we are nurturing life for ourselves, for others, and for the web of life as a whole. In order to embody this principle, Chris said we should plant trees. Quote, "Planting trees together, we bring this touchstone into our communities, and we also renew our spirits because nurturing life makes us happy," end quote. Chris had a deep love for trees and proudly referred to herself as a tree hugger. She mused that the first time she heard the phrase, she wondered, well, who wouldn't want to hug a tree? This question led her to dig deeper and realize that this phrase, often used disparagingly, is about saving a way of life, representing women's knowledge passed down through the generations from mother to daughter. In early agricultural societies, women not only gave birth to and nurtured children, they also gave birth to and nurtured plant life. Women understood the secrets of when and how to plant seeds, how to nurture plants, how to keep plants alive, when to harvest, how to process and preserve vegetable products, and how to save and store seeds for the next year. Quote, "In the Neolithic era, women were not only revered as birth givers, but as the nurturers and sustainers of life in virtue of the agricultural knowledge," end quote. As patriarchal norms do not value mothers, they do not value Mother Earth. The Western scientific paradigm, which is rooted in classical dualisms, defines rationality and knowledge as male capacities that stand in opposition to women and nature. As neither women nor nature are defined as having intelligence or value, modern science cannot recognize the intelligence and value in women's traditional interactions with nature. Thus, Chris has called us to embody our commitment to nurturing life and repairing the web, to, quote, "put our hands in the soil, tenderly teasing the roots of the trees we plant as we nestle them into the earth. We move from our heads to our bodies, remembering the interdependence of life," end quote. While quarantine during the pandemic was challenging, Christ met daily with friends via Skype to recite the yoga moon salutation. Quote, I stand tall, heart open to the world, body full and present in all of its beauty, end quote. In her last writings on feminism and religion, she shared how she awaited the sunrise each morning to see the plants and flowers she nurtured on her balcony, saying, quote, I can feel beauty healing me, end quote. Yet Christ wanted us to know that in addition to welcoming our life-giving light, we must also revel in the darkness. Quote, I encourage you to honor and celebrate the darkness, to rest, to sleep, to dream in the embrace of the longest night. Life is not all about light. It is about the cycles of light and darkness, birth, death, and regeneration, end quote. Through her love of the goddess, wisdom-filled insights, creativity, and generous spirit, Christ opened the world to a path of eco-feminist, ethical, religious, and spiritual discovery. She validated our stories, encouraged our artistry, and taught us to give ourselves permission to pursue our work in new and inspiring ways that honors our interconnectedness. As a cradle Catholic, I have often pondered the idea of resurrection. What I've come to realize is that our obsession with the idea of an afterlife has kept us from witnessing the ways our loved ones, those who have had the greatest impact on our lives, are resurrected within us each time we live out the wisdom they so graciously bestowed upon us. Carol lives on within her spiritual daughters and her sisters, including Mother Earth, where Carol's energy continues to animate. As we choose to trust our deepest feelings, to articulate them in celebration of an eco-feminist spirituality, to welcome our responsibility to nurture life and repair the web, and to plant and hug trees, Carolina is there. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gina. It was beautiful. Thank you for speaking on Carol's love of nature. I can see her as a tree hugger, and the nurturing of life as a philosophical ethos. Really, really cool. So Susan Carter put a comment in about the wave of Carol's voice. She said it looks like an Ouroboros in action, and it really did. So it was one of the ways to share that comment. So thank you. So our next speaker and our final speaker for this panel is Pamela Eakins. I have to say, I was personally really looking forward to this because I love Pamela's tarot deck to share that with her. So Pamela Eakins is giving a tribute to Carol Christ in poetic form. So Pamela Eakins, PhD, DD, CHT, is a sociologist, visionary cosmologist, mediator, priestess, and interfaith minister near San Francisco. She has taught at Stanford University and the University of Colorado. Her books include Tarot of the Spirit, Priestess, Lightning Papers, Visionary Cosmology, Terra Nova, and others. She teaches and has a private practice in residence and on Zoom. Welcome, Pamela Eakins. Hello, Pamela, are you there? I did see you.
I'm here.
There you are.
I don't know if I'm spotlighted, but I'm here.
Yes, you are. Yes, you are.
Okay. All right. I'm very moved by all the foregoing and realizing more and more and more what an amazing impact Carol had on all of us. This is a tribute to Carol Christ. Carol Christ. The song, the message, the messenger. She is, you are her. Wafting through redwoods, a languid river, tossing deep green ferns and trillium, ancient trunks swaying like kelp, all beings alive and moving together with everything else. She is, you are her. The cosmic woman calls, receive, receive. She receives, she elaborates, she creates, she renews. The song, the message, the messenger, she is, you are her, archetypally her. She, the message, she, the messenger, her song, her story, you, languid sea, are her purpose. You, rising sea, are her meaning. You, raging sea, are her justice. In you, justice is honed. Through you, absolution and grace. She is, you are her. The long-ranging power of rectification, present, presence, prescient, exacting, though justice is too large to view. You are her. She is you. She is. You are. You are her. Canticle, message, messenger, code, word, logos, vibration. She gathers you by the East Aegean in dance, in contemplation, in revelation, revelry, recitation. Woman's spirit rising, wine and food and song. She is, you are her, the joy of her becoming, her invitation to belong. The codices of solace and power, every flower wakens perfect. Rhododendron, luteum, haplophyllum, megalanthium, wild alyssum, everywhere. And everywhere we step, blossoms open in our prints. You said, and we understood, understand. We were, we are, we will be her. She is. You are. You are her. The dismembering and the fall. Thank you for remembering it all. Our light and shadow, our glory and our story through all our searching years. Thank you for remembering our warm embrace and our strong resist. Thank you for remembering the cosmic kiss. Blessed priestess and teacher, gifted cosmic mentor, shining light in our women's circle, rising. Dearest sister, Carol Christ. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. I have to take a moment to sit in that. It was so beautiful, so moving. While you were speaking, I got chills. Literally, thank you for that. Gorgeous. Mm-hmm. We have about 6 minutes remaining in our panel session. So if you'd like to put some questions in the chat, I think please go ahead and I will just read them. And please say who it is that you would like to ask the question of. Someone, or I can read some of the messages that are here from Frodo Okulam. He is saying, thank you to Pamela, and that her cat Min crossed the Rainbow Bridge this morning. And the leaves are falling. Thank you. And someone asks, Mara asks, Pamela, how did this poem come to you?
Hi, Mara. Oh my gosh. Okay. Oh my gosh. How did this poem come to me? I heard of Carol's passing. I remembered her spirit. I remembered meeting her. I remembered her luscious excitement about wine and food. That was a big thing in Greece. Anyway, it was that night I went to sleep, and it was, honestly, it was in the middle of the night it poured through. And I was remembering 35, 40 years of all that was. And the main feeling was that Aegean Sea rocking, and all that Carol brought forward in terms of the embodiment of that Aegean Sea and those redwood trees and all of it. So thank you. It came in the nighttime from Carol, presumably.
Thank you. So here's a question, I think, for Amara. What did death mean to Carol? What place did it have in her theology? Mara?
I think, yes, I think Lisa Christie is going to speak more about this in an afternoon panel. She did write about it. Carol believed in the finitude of this life, and therefore it was so important for us to make the very best of it and enjoy every minute of it. And she lived fully to the last minute of her life. The last day she was right. She was still working on her final article about Crete. She was writing plans for her next book of blogging for the goddess. She was such a powerful thinker, and she just embraced this life. She said because of embodied lived experience, she wasn't certain what else there was beyond death, that death might be the end. We just didn't know. It was possible for there to be another life, but she was wary about reincarnation as an excuse for accepting suffering in this life. So she said she would leave that to other people to explore. And I believe Lisa Christie is going to do some of that exploration. But Carol believed that we have this life, and this is what we need to embody fully.
Thank you, Mara. So I will read some appreciations here from Marianne. It says, this is from Melanie Moorhead. Thank you, Marianne. Your focus is really important to the evolution of culture and our thinking and spirituality. And Mystic Mother, Tracy Elise, says, Marianne, your presence is gentle, enchanting, subtle, and so authentic. Thank you, and Goddess bless your path and service. And let me scroll back down and see if there's another question. Scrolling. Yep, thank you, Mara, for that summary. So let me go back up. So if there are any other questions, please put them in the chat and I will read them. Otherwise, I will go back up to these lovely tributes from Marianne, especially since this is your first time from Mara. Thank you, Marianne. Your thinking opens our minds to think more broadly and inclusively about goddess theology, ecology, and ontology. So I hope you're taking all that in. All right.
Yeah, Carol's book, Rebirth of the Goddess, was very, very important to me at a junction in my life. I will never forget that.
So if there are no more questions, or we have about 1 minute left. So in this last minute, I'd like to just thank our presenters very much for being a part of our panel. Thank you to Dr. Mara Keller, to Beth Bartlett, to Marian Hertnagel, Pamela Eakins, Gina Messina, I didn't say before. So as we go back to the main room, we're going to break for lunch at noon, and we have a 1 hour lunch break. I said noon, wherever you are in the world, whatever time it is for you, we have where we convene in 1 hour. And during the intercession, there will be several links to resources, Carol Chris resources that you can access. So again, thank you all. It's been a pleasure, lovely to moderate this panel, and a pleasure to listen to all of your presentations. Very heartfelt and lovely. Thank you.